Hi, my name is Arjun and welcome to Energize, the tech revolution. Today we have a very special guest amongst us. Yuzhou Jing is currently the head of power origination and development strategy at Trina Solar Development LLC, a clean energy development company. Prior to Trina, Yuzhou was in a few senior business development positions, including business development director at Origis Energy, director of trading and origination at Broadreach Power, now NG Flexible Generation. Yuju holds a BA in Mathematics and Economics from University of Virginia and an MBA degree from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Welcome to the show, Yuju.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Very kind intro. Really
Uh,
appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Yuju, before we dive into your professional journey, would love to learn a little bit more about the motivation behind your educational background. Now, you have a bachelor's in mathematics and economics and have completed an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management. Would love to learn what excited you about mathematics and economics that allowed you to pursue an education in this field, and what was your one big key takeaway from your MBA program?
Yeah. Love the question. When I went to college, I joke with people that economics is always my passion. I think ever since I read the very first book on economics, I was just fascinated by how supply demand works together, right? How to kind of put everything that we experience in the society, kind of bundle that into economic theories, which you probably see, which kind of translate later in my passion for clean energy too, which we can explain later. But economics has always been my passion, so it was no brainer for me to choose economics. And, but I also had to find a job. So to me, mathematics was job security. Even before I get in college, I always tell myself that, get a mathematics degree, then you really can do anything else, right? You can study econ, or you st study business, or you study art history. End of the day, you can always rely on that mathematics to get a job. So to me, one is passion, one is job security. Uh, when I got into Kellogg, really the sort of the idea of getting into a business program is, I started my role early on as a very technical person, right? Very data driven, very much into the technical aspects of everything. But then we realize the sort of the importance of the non-technical aspects of your education of a business, right? So I got into Kellogg with that mindset, and frankly speaking, that was my biggest takeaway from Kellogg is the power of networks, right? Now I understand that in the past when I pitch something to clients, I always emphasize how this solution will help people technically, right? And in my mind, it's always a plan works or not. But actually, in reality, that's really never the case, right? By building that network, by building that relationship, it similar to how it works out between us, right? That you build that trust. With that trust, then people will listen to you, will listen to your solution, right? Because ultimately, there's always multiple path to certain solutions, right? So why would people pick yours, right? That's where sort of the non-technical aspect come to play. And really, that's like I said, that's my biggest takeaway from Kellogg. With the network Kellogg has, and one joke I have for you is, when you reach out to me and I want to answer your call regardless, right? Because you graduated from Kellogg too. So I think that shows you the power of networking and networks in general.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Yuju. Now, in terms of your professional journey, I would love to learn more. You've been in the clean energy space for the majority of your career. For the benefit of our viewers, could you share what comprises of clean energy? Why is it important? What are its benefits? And what got you excited to pursue a career in this field?
Yeah. Before I do that, let me read a disclaimer really quick. It's a request by my HR. I'm participating in this podcast in my own capacity as an individual, not as a representative of Trina Solar. Any opinion expressed reflect my personal opinions and not the company's position. With that get out of the way, I would say that when I get into clean energy industry was really a random event at the beginning, right? Just like a lot of other people. When I graduated from college, it's a nuance, right? Back 10 years ago, people talk about energy all the time, right? Clean energy is just a small portion of the energy industry, right? So I got into this company called Nodal Exchange. We will facilitate something called congestion trading. And to help you listeners to understand this, is basically congestion similar to traffic congestion, right? That with electricity trading, right? With electricity, you have tr generation, you have transmission, right? With transmission, sometimes the line gets congested, similar to a traffic jam, right? So very similar to how traffic congestion pricing will work, right? Because sometimes I don't know if you guys have that in Canada, but when you have toll roads, right, that where if you pay, you get into faster lane. When you don't pay, you're stuck in traffic. It's similar with electricity. Sometimes different lines will trade differently, right? So I got into that business really by chance. That was the really the best job I got into. But then gradually realize that that's actually one of the key problem a lot of clean energy company has to face is how do they manage congestion, right? Think about clean energy companies. Generation is very similar to any other manufacturing business, right? If you manufacture shoes, you manufacture in point A, you have to ship that to point B, right? So how do you manage that path? How do you make sure you can get from A to B, and how do you make sure you get from A to C? And increasingly, because think about wind and solar, you build a wind project or solar project because resources are great, right? So that area was really windy. So what's end up happening is everybody want to build there. All right, all the wind farms goes there, then it becomes congested, right? So when I sort of towards the end of my tenure at Node Exchange, that's when I was looking for new jobs. Realized, yeah, I was actually working on something that a lot of the clean energy company was facing. So it was an easy transition for me because of that niche. So I started working for this wind company called Apex Clean Energy. Exactly like I described to you is one of the tricky thing they have to face is when they're building in Oklahoma and Texas back in the days, everybody's rushing to the windy areas. Then it creates a massive congestion. Then I was hired to help them figure it out, right? And I think for your listeners that I would say that clean energy is really just a vast, complex industry complex, right? That from research to manufacturing, because think about all the technologies, right? Think about the turbines that a very long time ago, those are small turbines, right? Then they become higher, higher, higher. Now they're people are building massive offshore wind turbines. They're so massive that blows your mind, right? And that's all come from research and development, right? Now obviously there are people have to manufacture that. There's transportation, right? There's people like me on the business development side, right? Have to do the business and policymaker too, right? So it's the whole sort of industry complex. And the biggest thing is now it's growing, right? In the past, like I said, it's a niche. Now it counts for majority of the growth, not only in the United States, globally, right? So when people talk about new energy additions, right? Because not only people are consuming more energies, right? They're also old generation resource retiring, right? And what's the resource that's replacing them increasingly clean energies, right? So now it becomes effectively becomes now when people talk, at least when I talk about energy, that really we mean clean energy because now it becomes such a big portion of the energy, mix.
Th- Thank you so much, Yuju, for sharing that. Now, could you share more about, the landscape of renewable energy in North America versus Europe? Specifically, what's the landscape in Canada in comparison to USA, and also who are the countries that are in the forefront of clean energy innovation in Europe? Would love to hear more on that.
Yeah. I have to say that, I'm probably not expert in Canadian energy, landscape when European energy landscape, but what I would say is the biggest difference is, it might sound a little bit America centric, but I also believe it's true, is because how big the US market is, right? It's also more complex in terms of power grids. in United States, there's multiple what we call balancing authorities, right, across United States. So different balancing authorities that they're not necessarily clearly tied to each other. So different balancing authorities will have, when I say balancing authority, basically means think as a market, right? So different market have different rules, different regulations, right? And even within that markets, different state has different jurisdictions, right? So it's for one, it's very complex from pure power, power markets design perspective. But the other hand, when it comes to other things like the equipment, construction, financing, right? It has a unifying effect in the sense that if you let's say if you're a new solar manufacturer that no one has ever used a turbine panel before, the best way you can show off your turbine is the best is to build a product in the United States. Why? Because once you build the first project, that means you went through the entire life cycle of the project. That means the financiers, again, right? This is a free market, right? So that means the financiers have vetted, your technology. So this is what we call financeable. And once you become financeable in the United States, it really becomes financeable everywhere, right? So when you think about from that perspective, for new technologies, or not just solar, right? When anything, or even tech new market rules that people like to test it out in the United States, right? Once you test it out, they work everywhere else. In sort of in contrast to Europeans, right, or Canadian, it just it's a smaller market, right? So a lot of times it's a niche play, right? So if you wanted to go big, ultimately you have to kind of test your idea in the United States. I think that's what I think is the biggest difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, in terms of, the current major challenges facing in the adoption of clean energy, could you shed more light on that? And how do government regulations play in terms of facilitating the clean energy transition? Would love to hear more on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's also a very complex question, right? But I really think everything will come down to one word, policy. Um, obviously there's a different aspect of policy. Sometimes the policy some of the policy just making things more expensive to build, right? Uh, one example is the price of solar panels, right? Because of tariff, right? That's a very simple policy, right? Obviously it's to support domestic manufacturing, but effectively it raises the price, right? Uh, but that's not the biggest issue, right? The biggest issue is also a policy where if sometimes it makes impossible to build project, right? Because one of the biggest bottleneck right now for clean energy deployments is transmission policy. Like I mentioned before, right? Think about transmission. Transmission is basically like highways, right? So if think about like I said before, if you think generation as just manufacturing shoes, you can't just manufacture shoes in, let's see, I live in Oklahoma, right? You can't just manufacture in the entire global needs of shoes in Oklahoma and expect Oklahoma people in Oklahoma to consume it, right? It has to be delivered everywhere, right? So that's transmission, transportation for energy, right? And when you think about transmission, it's really tricky because the infrastructure in the United States vastly outdated. So you need to upgrade them, right? So who's going to pay for them? Right? How do you get in permitting, right? Which is one of the biggest issue right now is when you think about even building a generation resource, you find acres of lands and you get permitting for that, which is fine and done before. To getting a transmission, right? Let's say 100 miles transmission. Think about and you most likely you have to go through private land. That means you have to go a lot of times go landowner by landowner. And if one of them says no, then you have to circle around, right? And because all that requires all the clean energy needs transmission to act transport. it becomes a very big issue, right? And for your listeners' benefit, right? A lot of times the most windy and sunny places are not where people live, right? For example, Pando, Texas is, the western part of Texas. It's one of the most windy areas in the country, but it's nobody really live there, right? So you have to build that transformation, right? Again, that's where policy comes to play. How do you design policy to facilitate that, right? And I don't think anyone has a solution yet, right? A lot of times it becomes politics problem, right? And it actually impact people's life, right? When you build a transmission line across people's property, I mean, it is actually correct that it might negatively impact people's house value, right? So why would people agree to that? How do you compensate them, right? So all that's is a really hot button issue. Hopefully one day we'll solve that, but again, like I said, today that is the biggest constraint. Other things is also because again, this is a technology podcast, right? That when you have new technologies, right, there's a need for market design to follow up. I'll give you one simple example is energy storage, right? It's very simple, right? Energy storage charges power and discharges power, right? Uh, Conceptually very simple. But when you think about the markets, existing markets, the distinction between demand and supply is very clear. Is your generations will provide supply. Your customers like us are demand, right? There's really any case where the supply can be demand too, right? So even with just addition of energy storage has historically created a headache for power grids, right? So how do you deal with one entity that charges power and discharges power, right? So that's a very simple example to show you that there's going to be more technologies and more nuances come along. How can the policy making and how can the market design catch up? That's always always the biggest headache for anyone. But uh, like what we discussed before, right? Especially for the technology innovators, it's all about moving forwards, trying to break the rules and see how far they can push him. And that's exactly what we're doing in the clean energy industry too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Yuju. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, could you walk us through the typical life cycle of a renewable energy project?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think the best way to think about a clean energy project is think that as a real estate asset. Think about your house. How do you get to an empty space to have a house? And the only difference now instead of a house, it's a solar project or wind project, right? You start from let's say siding, right? That's what developer like us will do is we find a good site, right? Obviously you do analysis, right? Very similar to real estate too, is well, will people need my demand, right? In real estate, it'll be, will people actually want to live here, right? It sounds very simple, right? Ultimately, it becomes very complex. But once you find the sites, you have to build that what we call land position. So you either lease the land or you buy the land. Now you have a rough idea of the project itself. So once you get to that point, right? So the next thing is, well, how for let's say for you building a house, you have to get water, sewage, electricity to a house, right? And even when you were siting that house, you have to think about it, right? If it's too far away from the water line, you probably it would be too expensive to build it. The same for us, right? If we're too far away from an existing transmission system, that means that we have to build a very long transmission line to connect. So that might not be the best site. But if it's close to a substation, right, or it's close to a transmission line, it might be a better spot. Right. So siting is one. The second thing is, think about what I mentioned before is transmission, right? What we call interconnection. It's the right for your uh, project to pump power into the grid, right? That process by itself. in the past, it's easier to manage. Right now, like I said, it's the bottleneck for pretty much every single project. It's because there's too many projects waiting to get into the power system. So it creates a huge queue, right, where everybody's waiting to get studied. So that's the second piece, getting into the power grids. The third piece will be just like real estate permitting, right? You got to get all the regulatory permitting, make sure that you can actually build it, right? If it's industrial zoning, right? You have to make sure that it can be built, you can change that zoning to, being able to build generation, right? And once you have all that, and now you have to sell power too, right? It's similar to when you're doing the real estate developments, right? You have to a lot of times, obviously you can build on specs, right? You can build a house and trying to sell it, but the easier way is to find a customer first, right? Find a customer who's willing to buy the house, then you build a house for the customer, right? The same for us, which is my role, is to sell that power before we build the project. So that lead to the next step is financing. Once I sell the power, then we go to a bank and get the project finance, right? And the good thing is now I have approved that there's guaranteed revenue going forward, right? So the banks can run a model, be able to size their debt to us, then we finance the project. Then last thing is build a project. Well, second last thing is build a project. Once you build a project, uh, similar to how you build a house, right? Except it's more complex, right? It involves a little bit more. But then the last piece will be operation, right? Once the project is there, you have to operate the project. And I think the reason why I love about the industry, and I urge your listeners to really explore every aspect of the life cycle of the project is depend on which year you're asking people what is a bottleneck, right? What hurts you? What's keep you from have a good sleep at night? Every year is different. Sometimes some places could be permitting, right? Some states are known to really hard to get permitting. Very similar to real estate, right? Think about developing a real estate, uh, um, uh, developing real estate in California versus Texas. California definitely much harder, right? And some years it's a supply chain, right? During COVID, you just can't get equipment to ship to you, right? So and there's a tariff risk, right? So your solar panel prices, wind turbine prices keep going up, right? And some years right now, like I said, it's a transmission, right? It's an interconnection. So really what when you listen or think about which aspects of the business you want to get into, I would say really any aspect, right? It's really depend on a year, right? Sometimes it's great for your function. Sometimes it's for other people's function, right? There's always something to solve.
Thank you. Thank you so much for walking us through step by step the entire life cycle. It was extremely helpful. Now, Yuju, could you share, some of the bigger key players and bigger companies in North America who are at the forefront in the clean energy space?
Yeah, yes. So I'll just throw some of the names that I think people will recognize, right? For solar, for both solar and wind, NextEra is absolutely the giants of the industry. Uh, but for solar, you have EDF, EDPR, Cypress Creek, and a few others. Savion's another one. For wind, you have NextEra, Energy, Apex Energy, which I worked before, is one of the big wind developer too. Pattern Energy, based in Chicago, is another one. And also, the interesting thing is a lot of the wind developers is also doing solar, right? Yeah, a lot of solar developers sort of exploring into wind too, right? Because ultimately, when you think about it, it's similar, right? The biggest difference between wind and solar is, wind obviously requires much massive land space versus solar. But in terms of managing the energy piece, right? Facing the customer, it's all the same customers, right? So even though I said, those are biggest players in their respective industry, they're also competing with each other too, right?
Thank you so much for sharing that, Yuju. Now, in our conversation earlier, you alluded to the impact of technology in the clean energy space, but would love to hear how do you see, in your opinion, it playing a role in the energy transition space and its impact on power infrastructure and power trading? Would love to learn more.
Yeah, yeah, I'll say a lot, really a lot. And I think we can talk about this for hours. Yeah, I would say one example I give you, and I gave you before, is think about energy storage, right? When people throw the idea of energy storage, conceptually is very simple, right? That it's something that can store energy and that charge what we call charging, right, then can discharge, right? And when I tell people energy storage, they just think about lithium ion battery, right? Which is not so different from the battery, from the battery from a laptop, right? They're very similar. You can charge, then the discharges when you unplug the power plug. But once you dive in, it actually there's a lot of difference, right? That especially the technology piece. So there's chemical-based batteries, which what people mostly associate energy storage to, right? There's lithium-ion battery, and people also came up with new chemicals, right? Right now, one of the more popular technology after lithium ion is called sodium ion, right? Instead of using lithium, right, that use sodium, which is is very common to use. It requires a bigger space, right? By just by that alone, the chemical alone, there's a lot of new technology, sort of advancement, right? Like I said, on different chemicals because depending on the ingredients you use, right? That you have probably heard that there's multiple book written by how people keep money in Congo, right? Be able to kind of explore the resource over there because of the chemicals or the resource they need for lithium ion battery. Then you can then there's technology companies, right? The biggest energy storage companies that developing new chemicals that will make it work, but without using those components, right? And that's just chemical. And when you think about the use cases, right? That some use cases you need the energy storage to start right away, right? You want that to be instantaneous, and you don't need the duration to be that long. So that can be one technology. But some use cases you want that to be a slow burn, right? You want something might be slow starting, but can run for a long time, right? That's a different chemical too, right? And that's just chemical based battery, right? There's a lot of other energy storage technology too, right? One interesting interesting technology is gravity base. It's literally using gravity to store energy, right? So think about a crayon where the store, the charging component of that gravity based solution is lifting a very heavy block. And when you need to discharge, you drop that block, right? So that's gravity-based energy storage. There's also heat-based energy storage too, right? That one of the interesting things, people start making piles of what they call what was different salts or sand, right? When you heat up the sand, then you have massive energy stored there, and when you want to when it cool down, release the energy, right? So much so that people can use the heat pump at home to work as what we call distributed energy storage, right? Where you use things that can adjust their charging and discharging at home to be able to pump power back to the grid. So just by that alone, when you think about it, it's also every aspect of those technologies, right? Think about research and development, right? Think about the software development, right? When I'm talking about the gravity-based technology company, right? Well, you can't just sell that to people, right? You have to sell the software pair with that, right? That you need software engineers to code a program that helps deploy that technology, right? uh and there's obviously once you get to that space, how do you make everything cheaper, right? So there's research developments, manufacturing associated with that too, right? So like I said, uh, uh, even just the simple idea of charging and discharging involves so many aspects of technology advancements, right? When you expand that to other technologies, right? To win solar, different type of solar panels, different type of wind turbines. To now, one of the more popular things, modularize the nuclear plants, right? That's even more complex, right? So I think just from a technology advancement standpoint, there's an enormous amount of innovation that not only need different type of engineers to work on, but also sort of the associate service like marketing, sales, yeah, and software development, right?
Thank you, Yuju. Now, continuing the conversation about technology, artificial intelligence came into prominence over the last few years in the energy sector. How do you see specifically AI playing an impact in the clean energy space? And in terms of young individuals who are looking to break into the clean energy space, where do you see job opportunities being impacted because of AI? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that I mean, I think that's a great question, and keep people keep talking about AI, right? So I would say that the impact is massive. Uh, at the very superficial level, that AI evolution is creating massive amount of demand for power, right? We're frequently chatting with data center developers that when you think about where are the data centers being built right now, right? All the top markets are in very urban areas, right? Like Northern Virginia, right? Like like in the coastal city in California, right? Like Portland, those are all existing big data center markets, right? Because that's where all the fiber lines are. That's where you can hire people to work on them. But increasingly, when you ask data center developers, where do you guys want to build data centers? They tell you wherever there are power available. Doesn't really matter. They can go to the moon if there's power available, right? Because that right now that is the major constraint for data center is they cannot get enough power, right? So if someone has filed application to build a data center in Northern Virginia, they might have to wait for 10 years to get that to get approved, just because they have to wait in the queue, right? They have to wait in the queue for for Virginia to gradually build that generation resource so that they can supply that electricity to them, right? So so like I said, on a very superficial level, that create a massive opportunity for us, right? Because when you think about it, for two levels, right? Level one is that more demand for energy is always good for energy developers, right? For the obvious reasons. Second is that the because of the lack of power, and there's also involved equity problems too, right? When you build too many data centers, these urban areas was has a lot of population. Sometimes when you're not careful, right, you might increase the electricity rate for people nearby, and that becomes a problem, right? Becomes a politics problem. Um, so for us, the win is for data center developers to go to places where that's has less population, right? Uh, Less concentrated. That's a massive win for us because like I mentioned before, think about one where are all the wind solar project are. They're most likely it's not, in the middle of nowhere is probably a little bit aggressive, but it's close, right? We're often in places that have very little population, right? Because land is cheaper, resources abundant, right? Like Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma is where a lot of the wind developers start building wind project, right? But when you look at the population in Oklahoma, it's not that much, right? So that's the second layer win for us is now the demand, the willing to move close to generation, right? So when I talk about the transmission constraint, right? When I talk about the policy concerns for clean energy developers, uh, one way to solve that is also moving low close to generation, right? And obviously you can't ask people, regular folks like us, well, please move to in the middle of nowhere so you can get your house powered, but you can now you can move data centers there, and it's also happening. right? So I would say, even on a very superficial level, right? Regardless of technology, the AI evolution by itself is creating, is, is pushing the industry to, double, triple, quadruple the size in the next couple of years, just because of the amount of demand they have, and because I think we're positioned to tackle the problem they're facing, which is lack of electricity, right? We provide electricity. In the past, it's just difficult for us to deliver to you. But now, if you're willing to co-locate with us, right, we can solve a lot of problems. That's a very super level, superficial level. Obviously, especially for the technology itself, I think it also has a massive impact, right? One example I give you is I was working for a previous company of mine. When ChatGPT started, having the popularity it had, we started using a platform that use AI to help us review legal documents, right? So especially for me, one of the things we do all the time is, getting with lawyers, getting with, internal or external counsels, and summarize all the transactions we've done before, right? What is the industry norm, right? What has done before? What are the things that we don't like from the agreements, right? Now, 95% of that can be done by AI. Obviously you don't want to trust AI with everything, but it simplified agreement for you. So even that example, right? I mean, that really simplified stuff. And I think even from that example, what I would urge your listeners is to think about, when you want to become a lawyer, right? Maybe you don't want to concentrate on the things that you think a simple AI can do, right? Which like I said, summarize legal agreements is something AI can do pretty accurately, right? So maybe you don't want to, concentrate your effort there. Uh, and I will also say that, if you scale that a little bigger, that not just legal, but other aspect of business, it just becomes simplified on daily life, right? I joke with people other day that in the past, when I make PowerPoints, you know how make PowerPoint works, right? That sometimes you look for graphs that fits your description, and you Googling, right? You're trying to bing stuff and spend half an hour just trying to find the perfect graph. But now you have a Copilot from PowerPoint. You tell him this is what I want. Find something that fits this slide, and find something better than you can ever find, right? Because a lot of times it's air generated too, right? So even for simple stuff, right? It simplifies. Again, right? If you're really just good at making graphs, right? Maybe that's not something you want to do going forward too, right? Yeah, and last thing I would say is, this is kind of related to what I do as a profession, is when it comes to trading, power market design. Because in the past, when you think about it, that your power markets is very dependent. Well, in real time, right? Your power market supply demand has to be exactly the same, right? So a lot of times, becomes tougher because your demand varies all the time, right? Then you have to have your supply to meet the demands. Um, and a lot of times you demand us, right? When you're using electricity, right? Do you think about the like electricity bill? For the most part, you don't, right? And do you think about how different hours might be priced differently? No, you don't, right? But with AI, right, that can become a reality, right? Where it helps people plan, you know, the supply demand of the market design much better because the reaction is much faster, right? So again, I think the evolution for AI is all for the grades, right? Like I said, not only because there's no more demand, and but also helps pushing electricity markets to the new what I think is more efficient market design.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yuju, for sharing that. Now, in terms of, an individual who's looking to get into the clean energy space, you've been such a successful leader in this space. What sort of specific soft skills and technical skills helped you in your career, and what would you recommend to these individuals that they groom and develop?
Well, Uh, the tip one is I asked them to listen to your podcast, right? But jokes aside, I think one of the things that uh, may requires a little bit individual effort is really do the research yourself, right? Increasingly universities will have clean energy based courses, curriculums, right? But right now, it's similar to energy too, right? A lot of times it's hard to find a very specific concentration that says, this is a clean energy, right? This is for clean energy. So I would say, really requires to understand the life cycle of clean energy developments, right? Understanding what requires for a clean energy project to come to fruition, and really sort of prepare yourself with courses that, with classes that fits into that bucket, right? And be able to kind of demonstrate on your resume. And one of the important things is also because the industry is expanding so quick, right? You always want to be in an industry like that, right? That will snatch talents, uh, just because you're interested in the industry, right? Or just because you're good at math, right? So that's also something I will urge your listener to think about is, when you think about, well, do you want to be in the oil and gas industry or do you want to be into the clean energy industry, right? Mostly probably see clean energy, right? But I would also tell them that regardless of what your political view is, you think about what industry is growing, right? What industry is shrinking? For the shrinking industry, right, where they have to lay off, mid-level managers, right? Think about a fresh recruit. What kind of position can you get into? Whereas, growing industry, they can't promote people fast enough, right? They can't find people with the experience. They're willing to take on bets, right? From project to talents too, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is you're willing to bet on, this is the industry that's going to continue to grow, which is absolutely true, right? Regardless of what the election result in the United States, right? This is a global trend. Everybody's building clean energy, right? In order for, if you think about United States or Canada, right? In order for United States talent to be competitive, you have to be on what I call the bandwagon, right? So for the young individual too, is really the commitment to the clean energy industry and be able to do the research and be able to demonstrate that on resume. And once you get into the space, right? Think about what aspect of business attracts you more. And like I said, because the industry growing so fast, it's very common for people to switch roles, right? The finance guys want to be a developer, right? Want to actually go get land, go get permitting. That happens all the time, right? The and the reason for that is because, like I said, it's a growing industry, so people want to retain talents. And last thing I would say is, one of the things one advice I give a lot of young people who want to get in clean energy industry is one of the best position you can be in is be a developer that actually go develop a project. And it's also when you think about developer, they're also a project manager. So they'll be exposed to the entire cycle of a business instead of just one aspect, right? So if you're the finance guy, you just do project finance, clean energy. So sometimes your exposure to the entire cycle of project might just be limited to that last portion, right? uh, you never know, right? You actually might enjoy, hosting town hall meetings, right? It's not for everyone, but some people like that. That's what I urge people to do is, as a developer, you get exposed to different aspects of business. Once you get that experience, not only then you can decide, well, you want to keep going that path, or if you want to be the finance guy, you want to do business development, that experience all going to help you in the future too.
Thank you so much, Yuji, for that advice. Really appreciate that. Now, do you have anything to add more on, the future trends in the clean energy space?
Yeah, well, I'll say how long do you have?
As long as you want.
Yeah, the future trend is that um, I think I'll tailor the answer to what to your listeners, right? The young folks that want to get into the industry. The trend is very clear that the most mature industry for clean energy is wind. The second most mature is solar. So for the mature industry, right, where you get to expose with everything, and really what's going on is the technologies keep improving, right? That means the solar panels becomes more efficient, right? So in the past, one panel might be able to produce this much of energy. Now it can produce more, and it's lighter, right? It's just like the chips, right? When you have the iPhone, just every new generation, it becomes a little faster. That's for the existing industry, right? So when you think about getting in the industry, think about from that perspective. It's maturing, right? But then there's a growing trend, right? Think about energy storage, right? Think about nuclear power, especially modularized nuclear power, right? Those are new industry that need, basically have new sort of new challenges, right? Which also means potentially have more upside, right? So energy storage absolutely is one of the biggest trend, and I was describing different technology to you, right? But end of the day, a lot of times this is how sort of the industry complex works, right? The winner it's not winner takes all, but it has that fact, right? One of the reasons lithium ion battery took off was because people adopt this AI, start lowering its cost, right? Because a lot of that is the experience of building this amount of battery and building bigger scales, so the amount becomes cheaper. So when you look at lithium ion and versus some other early on, let's say zinc-based batteries, uh, at first it might be comparable, right, performance-wise and cost-wise, but gradually it becomes a winner, right? So when you think about the new trends, especially energy storage, right? If you think about joining a company that potentially will take off, think from that perspective, meaning that might or might not work out, right? Very similar to how just technology in general, right? That let's say social network, right? That Facebook absolutely dominate the market, right? So if you join a social network startup, think about the challenge you have to face. The same with the energy technology companies. Think about how that uh how that potential upside is. What do you learn from that, right? Yeah, I'll also say, does that have um more broadly speaking, applicable to what you potentially will do in the future, right? Because more often than not, those will not work out, right? So you probably want to work on something that even if it doesn't work out, but your experience can translate in the future, right? That's what I say about trend is that the clean energy is a trend, and there's different sort of different evolution of that trend, and just maybe be a little bit conscious about the company you join, what type of experience you want to get into.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yuju. So that concludes the formal portion of our interview for today. We like to end our podcast with a fun segment called a rapid fire, where our viewers and listeners get to learn a little bit more about the personal side of our guests. So, as part of this rapid fire, I'll be asking you three quick questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much, Yuju. So, firstly, as this is a tech podcast, would love to learn what is an app or a hardware product that you enjoy using?
I will give you a very boring answer. Right now it's the Microsoft Suite with Copilot. Uh, the reason for it, like I mentioned, is well, I make a lot of PowerPoint slides, right? Uh, now with the co-pilots, it's really becomes much easier, right? What used to give me a headache is the design, right? It's not the content, right? I can make the content. It's really design of slides, right? What graphic I'm gonna put, what's the background, right? Now the co-pilots really helps you do that, right? So I would say, it's not a way to say, sort of a small adoption of AI technology that's helping the existing technology. I mean that right now that's my favorite.
Great, great to hear that. Thank you. Secondly, what's a book that you've read that has had a big impact on your life and why?
Well, I'm gonna cheat on that a little bit. Just to give you an answer that's more applicable to this podcast. That my favorite book related to energy industry, especially clean energy industry, it actually have a big impact on me. It's called Superpower by Russell Gold. Russell Gold is an energy journalist. So this book is about this guy called Michael Scally. Used to be the founder of Horizon Winds, which is one of the very early wind developer. This talk about his journey at Horizon Wind, but also about his development of clean energy, a clean line, which is a couple of a massive transmission, long haul transmission lines he was trying to build in the past, but he failed. I mean, now he's back doing that again. But the book is about his sort of a personal business journey, and it's a great book because it tells you how tough it is, how sort of gut-wrenching it is, be able to sort of build projects and that costs lots of money, lots of effort, right? But the project ended up not happening because small things, right? Because one aspect of the business didn't work out, right? So I always urge folks who want to get into the business of development for clean energy, read that book first, right? You gotta set your mindset, right? That it's a lot of times a probabilistic game, right? You work on one project, it's almost like your baby, you trying to bring that to fruition, but it could be killed by a lot of things, right? The project might just die. You got to have a sort of a understanding of that concept and knowing that, you're contributing to the better good, right? Overall, if everybody making the efforts, a couple of those projects will get built. Even though your project won't get built, it will be fine, right? So that's that's it's called Superpower by Russell Gold. I recommend everyone to read it.
Thank you, Yuju. And lastly, do you have any final words of wisdom, perhaps a short story or quote that you'd like to share with members of our audience?
Yeah, my favorite quotes, and I think this again has a lot of relevance for development. It's called "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." And that happens in development all the time, right? And I tell my developer, especially younger ones, all the time too, is we just need something that works. We don't need something that's perfect. We're not looking for perfect solutions, right? We want to keep pushing the sort of the landscape and the industry forwards. And sometimes you're not gonna have a perfect solution, right? Think about all the debate on climate change too, right? That you know, a lot of people argue that carbon tax is the best solution for dealing with climate change, but sometimes the political landscape don't allow that. What do? You just do nothing? No, you find something else, right? The same with clean energy development. I think that's the mentality you need to get into clean energy development, right? If you're someone looking for perfection, yeah, that is going to be a tough journey for you.
Thank you, Yuju, for sharing your perspective and for participating in the rapid fire. So that concludes our interview for today. How can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
I think the best way is through LinkedIn. You just search my first name Yizhou, last name Jing, uh, at Trina Solar Developments. You'll be able to find me.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuju. Thank you so much for being on our show today. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure having you. And thank you so much for sharing your subject matter expertise on clean energy. Now, from the team at Energize, wishing you, your company, lots of growth and lots of success.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking me on.
Absolutely. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, our episode for today. And remember, you're one product away from transformation. I'm Arjun Chaudhary.